heading towards their seats. Thank you, Susan. Yes, because I'm not sure, we're going to be pretty close on seating, so there's two padded ones up here, ultra comfortable. Actually, there's not one here.
I'll take it mine.
Tom's not going to be there for long. So welcome tonight. I'm Martha Johnson, Director of the Mayor Museum. And I'd like to welcome you to the 23rd Annual Helen Clark Berlind Symposium. The Berlind Symposium is always held in conjunction with the annual exhibition. We are surrounded this evening by the 103rd Annual Exhibition, A Menagerie of Metaphors, curated by Kathy Muehlman here in the front row. Wave your hand, please. There she is. 23 years ago, friends and family of Helen Clark Berlind, class of 1958, established a symposium in her honor, which was intended to extend and expand the educational impact of the annual exhibition. The centerpiece of the symposium is always an interdisciplinary panel discussion, and that will be held here tomorrow at 1:30. And the panel is meant to include scholars and artists to offer unique perspectives on the themes that the exhibition raises. Past panelists have included Linda Nochlin, Jennifer Bartlett, Klaus Curtis, Rackstraw Downs, Emmett Gowan, John Stilgo, Susie Gablick, and Judy Pfaff. Tonight we start the symposium with a poetry reading by Tom Sleigh. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock will be a gallery talk by artist Jenny Lynn McNutt, who's also here in the front row and is the creator of these works behind me and over on that wall. So please plan to be here at 11 o'clock, and then tomorrow we'll break for lunch and come back here for the panel discussion at 1:30. Tom Sleigh is the author of 9 books of poetry, a translation of Euripides Herakles, and a book of essays, Interview with a Ghost. Widely anthologized, his poems and prose have appeared in the New Yorker, Virginia Quarterly Review, Poetry, American Poetry Review, Yale Review, Threepenny, The Village Voice, and other literary magazines, as well as the best of the best American poetry in 2013. Sleigh has received the Shelley Prize from the Poetry Society of America, an Academy Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and fellowships from the American Academy in Berlin, the Guggenheim Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts, among many others. He is a distinguished professor in the MFA program at Hunter College and lives in Brooklyn. Please join me in welcoming Tom Sleigh.
John, would you like to? Okay. Everybody have the seat they want? Because I just left mine, maybe if you'd like to move up. Well, this is a really, it's sort of a thrill because behind me, of course, are Ginny Lynn's rabbits, and in front of me are Mr. Brandt's elephants. Ginny Lynn and I were talking today. Over the last 10 years, I've been doing some journalism, places like East Africa, Somalia, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember once I was, fortunate enough to go to the Masai Mara in Kenya and actually see live elephants doing what these elephants sort of look like they're doing, looking really big. And it was, there was a particular moment, I remember, I was telling Ginny Lynn about it. It was right at dusk, and you got out of your Land Rover, and then all around you, 360 degrees, silhouetted against the sky, were zebras, lions, giraffes, elephants. It was a very amazing experience. So I wish I had poems about giraffes and elephants. But, you know, I have poems about dogs and cats. So I'll read some of those. Before I read anything, I just want to say what a great honor it is to be here for the Berlind Symposium. I want to say thanks to everyone who's made this such a, an amazing show. And Kathy and Martha, John, everybody whom I've met, Sleigh, Gary, Laura Gray, David. You all know who you are. So I'm just delighted to be here, deeply grateful, and of course, my old pal, Miss McNutt. I remember when she asked me a while ago to write a little catalog essay about her rabbits, and I was so thrilled to see them because they really are rabbits. They're bizarrely rabbit-like and bizarrely human-like, and they're very beautifully done, very beautifully painted. And it's the first time I got to see the sculptures, so anyway, I'm just really grateful to be here. Enough gratitude. I was told that this building was built kind of in response to the Cold War, because I guess everybody was afraid that the Russians were going to bomb the National Gallery. That would have shown more imagination than I think the Cold War showed. But anyway, I'll read a poem that sort of comes out of that experience. I'm a child of the Cold War very much. And when I was a kid, my mother and father ran a drive-in movie theater. And this was way out in East Texas. And I went every night to the movies because we didn't have babysitters, of course. My mother ran the snack bar, my father ran the projector, and I slept in an old green Plymouth. I slept in the window well here, my twin brother slept there, my older brother slept in the back seat. And at a certain point, you have to go to the bathroom. I climbed down, and I stepped out into the parking lot, trying to make my way to the snack bar, and the film broke. And everything went dark, except for the screen was, just lit with the white light. And the other thing about this, I'm not going to talk very much after this poem, is, just to give you a warning. I'm not going to blather on and on. But anyway, one of the, I think, most interesting responses to the Cold War, in addition to this beautiful museum, were the kind of great B science fiction movies that came out. We call them the creature feature. People liked them. And I remember that, they were an interesting response to and thinking about animals, and when people talk about animals as kind of alien or foreign or other. And certainly, that was one of the ways we thought about the Russians, alien, foreign, other, is that those sci-fi movies were all about the alien, the other, the foreign, intruding into the fabric of daily life. And I remember one particular movie I particularly loved was there's a bunch of mad scientists on a little desert atoll which has been hit by an atomic bomb, and all the flora and fauna on the island, the crabs are as big as boxcars, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure you've seen the movie. Anyway, what happens in it is mad scientist walks by, a crab dashes out, eats mad scientist, goes back, and another mad scientist comes by, and the crab lures the mad scientist coming by, and he dashes out of the cave, but he's speaking in the voice of the mad scientist. He's just eating. So, I know that's a metaphor for something, but I'm not sure what. Okay. Anyway, the situation of the poem, I had to go to the bathroom. That's it. Newsreel. Can everybody hear me? Okay. It was like being in the crosshairs of a magnifying glass, or the beams of the planets concentrating in a death ray, passing right through me, boring a hole between my shoes through the concrete floor all the way to the far side of the earth. Yet it was only not knowing how to get where I was going. I'd gotten lost in the parking lot on the way to the cinder block bunker, where my mother worked the snack bar, my father the projector. The drive-in movie screen stretched horizon to horizon. The whole of Texas sprawled around. Cathedral-like DeSotos and great finned Pontiacs, flickering and sinister in torrents of light flooding down the screen. Frozen in that light, I might have been the disconsolate, ageless, stone-eyed child, ornamenting the pillar in a dead Roman city high up on a desert plateau. I wasn't even as tall as the speakers mumbling on and on. The way now, in my dream of extreme old age, I hear voices mumbling interminably. Where does it shimmer, my refuge, the grotto of my swimming pool, lapping in the infinite leisure of the newsreel? At last my mother appeared from among the cars and led me back to the snack bar, but I still hovered out there, turned loose among the shadows, disembodied passions, striving for mastery above the tense windshields. There gleams Marilyn Monroe, movie star, enjoying her fame in the voluptuous, eternal present tense of celebrity, being worked over by hands of her masseur. Bougainvillea overgrows her beach bungalow retreat of peace and pleasure. The screen, nothing now, but layer on layer of flesh the fingers knead in a delirious ballet, pushing, pulling, palms slippery and quick, ambiguous instruments of comfort or of pain. The rush of blood to her face clouds into white light as film stock jerks across a void half-coma blackout, half-nightmare aura. The film jammed, raw light pulsing like a bandage on a face wrapped round and round in surgical gauze. Wherever that light took me looms far from candy bars and gum wrappers blazing under glass. The movie poster death ray stopped the earth revolving. Time had stopped. My mother's black slacks and my father's not yet grown goatee, my own hands shaking nervously about, were silently dissolving in that ray bombarding from beyond the galaxy, being invaded by screeching, beseeching noises of alien beings searching for a planetary home. Then, up there, on the screen, frenetic in the light, was a hair, trembling between two cloven lobes of shadow that were part of the projector's overheating brain, its brilliantly babbling, delusional, possessed by shadows, dispossessed brain. Martha mentioned this poem's poem earlier today. The poem's called Space Station, so it keeps on with this outer space thing. But there's a dog in it, so my mother's dog. Anyway, in the poem, I imagine my mother's kitchen as a kind of space station in a moment of weightlessness where everything is floating. My mother and I and the dog were floating, weightless, in the kitchen. Silverware hovered above the table. Napkins drifted just below the ceiling. The dead, who had been crushed by gravity, were free to move about the room, to take their place at supper, lift a fork, knife, spoon. A spoon, knife, fork that, outside this moment's weightlessness, would have been immovable as mountains. My mother and I and the dog were orbiting in the void that follows after happiness of an intimate gesture. Her hand stroking the dog's head, and the dog looking up, expectant, into her eyes. The beast gaze, so direct and alienly concerned to have its stare returned. The human gaze that forgets for a moment that it sees what it's seeing and simply, fervently sees. But only for a moment. Only for a moment were my mother and the dog looking at each other, not mother or dog, but that look. I couldn't help but think, if only I were a dog, or mother was, then that intimate gesture, this happiness passing, could last forever. Such a hopeful, hopeless wish I was wishing. I knew it and didn't know it, and just as my mother knew she was my mother and didn't. And as for the dog, her large black pupils, fixed on my mother's faintly smiling face, seemed to contain a drop of the void we were all suspended in. Though only a dog who chews a ragged rawhide chew toy shaped into a bone, femur or cannon bone of the heavy body that we no longer labored to lift against the miles-deep air pressing us to our chairs. The dog pricked her ears, sensing a dead one approaching. Crossing the kitchen, my father was moving with the clumsy gestures of a man in a spacesuit. The strangeness of death moving among the living. Though the world was floating with a lightness that made us feel we were phantoms. I don't know if my mother saw him. He didn't look at her when he too put his hand on the dog's head, and the dog turned its eyes from her stare to his. And then the moment on its axis reversed, the kitchen spun us the other way round and pressed heavy hands down on our shoulders so that my father sank into the carpet. My mother rested her chin on her hand and let her other hand slide off the dog's head. Her knuckles bent in a kind of torment, of moonscape erosion, ridging up into peaks, giving way to seamed plains, with names like the Sea of Tranquility. Though nothing but a metaphor for how I saw her hand, her empty, still strong hand, dangling all alone in the infinite space between the carpet and the neon-lit ceiling. Oh, why not? We're sort of down the road with a dog. I'll do another dog. This poem's called What the Dog Really Says. There's an essay by a guy named Samuel Butler, and he said, basically the essay says there are lots of other creatures other than human beings who have language. For example, a dog looks at you, it looks at the door, it looks back at you, and that says, I went out. And so Butler calls that not language, but eyage. So what the dog really says. It wasn't language, but eyage, the dog spoke. Looking at the door, then at me, then at the door. its eyes signaling something more than what Chekhov said the dog smelled in each corner of the room. The unquestioned superiority of human beings. Nor was it what Nietzsche thought when he wrote that a dog comes up to the philosopher as if to ask a question, but then forgets the question. For there was no question when the dog licked the hand. There was a smell of a kind that the dog must have known so well from when the hand took it out for walks, and the dog plunged its nose into frozen meat of a dead gull on a day so cold. Only the faintest microbial whiffs of rot could thread their way up the dog's nostrils and knot and unknot in its brain. What the dog really says is that if a dog could talk, we couldn't understand it. And so the dog moves in a harmony of nose to smell, claws clicking on the sidewalk as it marks with a squirt of piss this tree, that fence post. The laminar overlays of scent, like pages leafed through in a diary, in which each entry keeps changing in a present that has no future, but only a fading past. For 3 days and nights, the dog didn't move from under the bed, where the man whose hand it licked for the salts on the hand, the subtly changing salts, lay unmoving. But why did the dog keep lying there once the body was zipped away into a body bag, wrestled onto a gurney as the undertaker, unshaven, in rumpled white shirt with maybe gravy stains on the collar, his black slacks and jacket fitting a little too tight, tried to make the dog move until the dog showed its teeth and began to bark. What's in the dog-hearted, dog-brained dog's heart? And why would we say that a dog is afraid his master will beat him today, but not that a dog is afraid his master will beat him tomorrow? The salts on the man's hand, did they smell and taste of what a dog smells and tastes when it rolls on its back in half-rotten flesh and comes running with that odor wafting from its matted down fur toward the hand that feeds it and that it licks? Things to be eaten, smelled, sat upon, run away from. Things that die, but don't make a dog fearful. The many ways dogs bark in the dwindling languages. Bow wow, blaff blaff, how how, gong gong, tyav tyav. What does the dog know of this? Its features scrunching up into a puggish, wrinkled, I'm worried, shouldn't you be, face? The poem's called Fly Me, as in me the fly. And people have done experiments to find out how a fly senses time. And apparently a fly's sense of time is a lot more fast than our sense of time. So that when you've got a newspaper and you're bringing it down really quickly on the fly's thinking, man, it's taking a long time. All the way down here, a lot of time, we've got tons of time before it hits me. So, I was having a medical test and I was waiting for the result, and this sort of came to mind. Fly me, as in me the fly. My eyes were seeing, in the slowed down time of a fly, that watches in slow motion the infinitely slow flicker of the rolled newspaper coming closer and closer in such agonizing slowness that the fly if it could think, might feel inside itself a kind of infinite leisure. When they brought back the test results, which were positive or negative, time in its slowness was so voluptuous that it was like the accelerating, always not quite fast enough friction of sex, speeding up to the never quite there, always arriving consummation. Except it was fear, perceiving fear as the ultimate pleasure. As my 1,000 eyes took in so many frames a second that my wings beat negligently slow, knowing that Fly Me had hours and hours before the paper came crushing down. And in those hours, Fly Me was better than immortal. My jittery clockwork head ratcheting in a swivel of being wound up beyond such stupid, clumsy swipes. My agile slipping in and out among the clicking seconds, making time attend on my hairy legs and all my 1,000 eyes, seeing the paper coming closer, but always far enough away so that my wings knew to spurn what was coming. My crystalline wings that would deliver me to safety, just as long as I kept myself from knowing what, in a few moments, I would know. Let me see. I think I'll read a poem. This poem is called Self-Portrait with Shoulder Pads. And I played high school football. I'm still in recovery, as you can see. Anyway, the only thing you really need to know about this poem is that there was an old talk show host named Joe Pine. And Joe Pine would have people on his show. Anybody remember Joe Pine? Well, you remember Joe Pine. Well, you know what he was like. He had people on the show who would insult them. Right? I mean, that was the whole purpose of the show. And once he had Frank Zappa on, there was a very famous exchange. I know if it's true or not, but I choose to believe it's true. And the only other thing you knew about Joe Pine is he had a wig. So, he did. So my twin brother and I played on the football team, and once my coach said, Tommy, get out here, we're going to do a drill. You know, we wanted to show the rest of the team how two brothers, twin brothers, would just like, go ahead. So, anyway. Self-portrait with shoulder pads. An animal comes into this again. The brother fighting brother, and the loser driven out. My eyes were on Tim's eyes, off someplace, gone from his body, while under his jersey the shoulder pads gleam brighter, masculine yoke we both labor under, determined not to get knocked flat. Smashing and smashing into each other, helmets blankly ringing to the whole team screaming in time to the drill, Timmy hit Tommy, Tommy hit Timmy. Until, exhausted, we fall to our knees, and still Coach refuses to blow the whistle, so that we, on our knees, keep ramming into each other. Implacable, servile, our hearts too violent not to play inside the rules. How we envied the hippies on the Joe Pine show, Pine sneering to Frank Zappa, so, I guess your long hair makes you a woman. Zappa shooting back, I guess your wooden leg makes you a table. White as calcium, white as moons brought down into swamp water, white as a cataract on a blind eye, the pads fuse on the shoulder bones to make us walk that athletic walk of power and glory, terror of shame, So Tommy hitting Timmy and Timmy hitting Tommy takes over mind and body in the zone until Coach blows the whistle and we get up off our knees and turn to avoid each other's faces. Years later, brought down by gun flash insights of assassination and business frowns of gangbangers dividing up junk, while police held the line in riot masks and shields, I prayed for the cup to pass. But either way, I was an ass and had to carry my ass's load as far as an ass could. And here's a poem. Actually, I'll read this for Laura Gray, since she's a Shakespearean, in addition to being a poet. This poem, not that I planned this, is called From the Ass's Mouth. It's called From the Ass's Mouth, A Theory of the Leisure Class. And I played bottom in high school in Midsummer Night's Dream. And if you remember, bottom is the mechanical, they call him the mechanical, the working man, whatever you want to call it, who plays in the little play within the play for the royal couple, Theseus, the Duke of Athens. And I hadn't read the play in a long time, and I reread it, and I discovered that all of the play, which we're doing, this lower class, working class, whatever you want to call it in terms of today's terminology, that we're being insulted constantly by kind of very witty remarks which are going right over our heads. So I thought that was an interesting thing to think about. From the Ass's Mouth, the theory of the leisure class. And as you all know, probably, don't you hate that, aren't posting thing, but all of the rustics and the mechanicals, the lower class characters, always speak in prose, whereas all the upper class characters always speak in verse. Up on stage, in the 3/4 empty auditorium, the lights turned down. Up where the auditorium resounded to A Midsummer Night's Dream, performed clumsily by me, reading out Bottom's speech when he turns from an ass back into a human, while the rest of the class sniggered or flirted, sat back and chewed gum. The words in the auditorium lived out their hour. And after rehearsal, when I got on my bike, a red bike, fat tires, to pedal home under cottonwood trees, I turned around corners I'd never seen in our tiny mountain town. Years and years went by. I was still pedaling. It wasn't a dream, except maybe in the way logic works in dreams. I had two heads now, my ass's head, my human head. My ass's bray more eloquent than my human bray of wonder at my change. The eye of man hath not heard, the ear of man hath not seen, my stumbling tongue piecing through Shakespeare's bitter oratory about no bottom to bottom's dream. I put my bike in the carport and started throwing a tennis ball against the brick wall, thinking over and over, no bottom, no bottom. The harder I threw, the more the words weren't mine. The ball smashing brick while there in the auditorium, the words were like a taunt, like Theseus's taunt spoken behind my back because I was just an ass, not Duke of Athens. But after the play, the cast gave me the papier-mâché ass's head, and I kept it first in the room I shared with my two brothers, putting it on to sniff the dry glue, feel the claustrophobic fit, and stumble half blind to the bathroom mirror, where I looked out at myself through holes in the muzzle. The asses painted on eyes and lips what people saw when they saw me. Shakespeare's words booming back from the head's suffocating hollows, coming straight from the ass's mouth, not mine. I don't remember how, but it ended in an alcove above the carport, where it softened on the chicken wire. The paper sagged and began to flake away, the muzzle and the eye holes shriveling into a gray, ulcerous mass. When we moved from that town, it got thrown into the trash, taken to the dump, and burned. Onion eaters, garlic eaters, hard-handed men. That's what Bottom and the Mechanicals were. And that's what I was, what I've always been. Riding along on my bike's fat tires while that half-god, half-man Theseus laughs his courteous contempt of us, whose words come out like a tangled chain. Which is why there's no bottom, why there's never been a bottom, if you're just an ass who speaks prose to the duke's verse. An ass who kissed the queen of the shadows and never got over it. My long, scratchy ears and hairy muzzle pressed to the ethereal, immortal, almost not there-ness of her skin. And here's I guess a weird logo. Dog, again. It's called Stairway. In those days, so many stairways were said to lead to happiness, mainly of a sexual kind. And as I climbed those stairs, I could hear my name being called from the top, as I so often did back then. And the sight of me bolting up the stairs with my eager cartoon tongue hanging out wasn't as sad or silly as it might seem. Naturally, there were the avatars of sex, the ones who claimed to hate it, the others who thought it led to universal harmony. They were out in front of the rest of us, and they believed it, and so did I. But as a friend recently said to me, always having to lead the way, be in front of the troops, all those speeches and sermons and truths you have to tell, such a burden. It went on like this, stairway branching into stairway, endless others going up or down to meetings just as I was. And after many years, there we were, to find you, to hold you, led like steps up and down. The sadness and silliness, though just as sad and silly, were somehow more in earnest. Even my dog-eat-dog instincts, strong as always, understood some reckoning was at hand. The two of us had decided, mutually and irrevocably, to start climbing a stair that we knew was partly ruined, unlit except by the capriciousness of moonlight. But we had a method. And until the day when one or both of us stumbled off into the nothingness below, we committed ourselves to it. When one said left, we turned left, which meant, because I have a terrible sense of direction, that I went whichever way you went. The poem's called Dog, Cat, and Soul. It's about, at night when a cat approaches you and looks into your face. Wow, what's going on? To be hollowed out night by night, to feel this continuum between envy and desire, to have the kind of fur that sheds sparks in the bedroom shifting dark, to sense when I'm asleep, your whiskers measuring the void around my face that expands inexorably year by year, to know that in your eyes, God is just a bird trapped in the burning bush, and to have to disappoint you with my dog-cat soul, more dog than cat really, more nakedly beseeching, less able than you to be out there on your own. Given all that, what makes you crave my touch tonight? When your eyes entrap me, I splinter into your looking, into what your looking sees, the seeing itself stripping me down to flesh and bone and found wanting. My face gone vagrant, paralyzed in your pupils, yet heightened and varnished beyond fact. I fall, am falling. I've plummeted beyond the frame. No internal balance wheel to land me on all fours, no mechanism of grace, no safe harbor under the radiant engine plot, the streets rippling with black ice. But don't turn away from me. Turn my skin head to fur head. Teach me slash, sling, creep. Show me how to survive under a heating vent. I'll just read a few more. I have a daughter, but I don't really know what to call her since she's not really my real daughter. So, you can say stepdaughter, but that doesn't really do it. It's just an odd thing. It's this, child was coming into your life after divorce, and then 10 years on, they're your child, but they're not your child. It's an odd thing. Second sight. In my fantasy of fatherhood, in which I'm your real father, not just the almost dad arriving through random channels of divorce, you and I don't lie to one another, shrugging each other off when words get the best of us, but coming full circle with wan smiles. When you hole up inside yourself, headphones and computer screen taking you away, I want to feel in 10 years that if I'm still alive, you'll still look at me with that same wary expectancy, your surreptitious, cool-eyed appraisal, debating if my love for you is real. Am I destined to be those shark-faced waves that my death will one day make you enter? You and your mother make such a self-sufficient pair. In thrift stores, looking for your prom dress, what father could stand up to your unsparing eyes gauging with such erotic calculation your figure in the mirror? Back of it all, when I indulge my second sight, all I see are dead zones. No grandchildren, no evenings at the beach, no bonfires in a future that allows one glass of wine per shot of insulin. Will we both agree that I love you always, no matter my love's flawed, aging partiality? My occupation now is to help you be alone. I'll just read two more. I'll read this one. poem is called, oh, I have to find it. Well, where is it? Here it is. Bedtime story. I have a dream, and I have a friend who has dreams. My dreams are sort of like his dreams. He goes to sleep. He's thirsty. He dreams about a glass of water. He gets up. He drinks the water. That's it. So if I ever get anything beyond that, it's great. So the very first line of this poem came to me in a dream, which is a bad sign always. But anyway, I went with it. Bedtime story. The infamy of America Bank is closing. My cat is the officer who closed it. All she did was walk across the table, jump down onto the floor, and the market crashed all the way to the underworld. And down there in those dark economies, among the hard cash of the dead, and the dense electrical crackle of her fur, my cat grows huge inside her purring. Her eyes not the color of money, but of fog. And in that fog, see her pouncing on a soul, helpless as a vole she grips in her jaws. Its fur stinking in that acrid way of dead leaves, mud, oil-slicked gutters. The infamy of America Bank has been brought down by one swipe of her paw, by her irises dilating to the pupil's rim. And now she leaps back up from the underworld, stalks across my bed, butts her head against my head, yowling in that half-strangled way for me to take her prey until her jaws open and the soul, bleeding, crawls away. How slowly she retracts her claws, how slowly pushes them out, so I feel the lightest prick, cool from the night hunting, on my cheek. And I feel myself falling asleep under her paw. All the nations of the earth falling asleep. I'll end with this poem. Let's see, where is it? It's called Dragon. And it's unclear if it's a dragon or a vacuum cleaner. What it is. And this poem comes very much out of a lot of the journalism I've read in the Middle East. I think they sort of come clear. Anyway, one of the funny things about dragons is think of the amount of shit they have to put up with. You know, Wagner, all of it. The dragon, huddling in its coils, won't come out. It lies dreaming in its scales, as forgotten as an old vacuum cleaner in a broom closet. Despite the stink of cordite and sulfur on its breath, how it hated in its youth the no-quarter duels against those berserk Anglo-Saxon sons of both, and later the tin cans on horseback, calling themselves knights. At least their horses, who hated fire, had enough sense to be afraid. So much repetition in a life, so much wasted time, So much courtly blather. The dragon wants no more of it. No more vomiting fire on a town of orange trees near the Atlas Mountains, so that a YouTube video can show the liberators celebrating what to the dragon is so boring. He's yawning before the first hair on these enemies' head is singed. These monotheists, as every dragon knows, are the worst. To the dragon, the broom closet, dusty, dark, smelling of shoe polish and bleach, broom straw tickling its nose, is as close to freedom, to feeling unmixed happiness, as the dragon has ever known. And such dreams the dragon dreams. Mother dreams and father dreams, tempters and orgies, and one special dream of a girl dragon who keeps changing into a boy. Such joy to be shut away from the octaves above high C, the meat slab faces of heroes warbling and braying basso profundo, just begging to be barbecued in their armor. And as for the one who would knock his wine glass on the floor and go looking for the broom, reaching his hand into the dark, does he risk having his flesh scorched to the very bone? Or does the dragon, so forgetful of itself that it flinches at the lightest touch, spread its wings and fly away? Thank you.
Please stay, linger, and enjoy the exhibition.